everyone, welcome to my kitchen. I'm Chris and today we're going to be making homemade yogurt. To make yogurt, you really only need two ingredients. You need milk. I'm just using plain old store-bought milk. And I'm using whole milk. I think it just tastes and turns out better if you get whole milk versus skim or 2%. And I'm using yogurt, just store-bought yogurt for my culture. You can buy specific yogurt cultures to make yogurt, but I find that it's not necessary to do. It's just an added expense that you don't really need. Using yogurt from the store works perfectly. It's pretty cheap. The one thing you do want to look out for if you are using store-bought yogurt for your culture is the ingredients. You want yogurt that is only milk and culture. A lot of yogurts will have thickeners or sweeteners added to them, sometimes preservatives, and you want to avoid yogurts like that. That's why when I make yogurt and I need to add some culture from a store-bought yogurt, this is usually what I choose because it's only grade A pasteurized skim milk and cream and live active cultures. That's it. Those are the only ingredients of this yogurt. So that's why I like to choose this one. And our store has it. If your store has a different one that has ingredients just like that, then that's a good choice for you. All I'm going to need to make this yogurt is a large stock pot with a little bit of water in it. I'm using 4 quart-sized jars to make my yogurt. This should hold most of a gallon of milk, and it's also the number of jars that my stock pot can hold. So I can't do a batch larger than 4 quarts. The first thing we're going to do is pour our milk into our jars. I am only going to fill up these jars with milk until the jar starts to curve here. If you fill the jar too full and you try to put the culture in later, your jar will overflow. That is why we only add milk until the jar curves. I like to make my yogurt in these jars. If you have an Instant Pot that has a yogurt setting, then making yogurt is extremely simple for you. Really, all you have to do is pour your milk in and then follow directions. Hit the yogurt button, wait till it beeps, add your culture, hit it again, and wait till it's done. It does the whole process for you. But my Instant Pot doesn't have a yogurt setting, so I have to do it a little bit different. When you can make yogurt by just putting the milk directly in a pot, heating it up, adding your culture and incubating it all in one place, that works great. One thing you do have to be aware of is that it can be a lot easier to scorch the milk if you're heating it directly in the pot. You can still scorch it by putting them in these jars if you heat it too fast at too high of a temperature, but that little bit of separation between the bottom of the pot and the milk does help prevent that from happening. And it is one of the reasons I like using the jars. The second reason I like using it is because then my yogurt it starts and ends in the same place. I can put my milk in the jar, I add my cultures, I incubate it, and then I also store it in these jars. If I made it in a separate pot, I would still have to take it out of that pot and put it into something to store it in my fridge. If I start it in the jars, I don't have to worry about moving it from one pot to another to put it in my fridge when it's ready to go. I already feel like I have enough dishes that accumulate in this house. So anything that I can do to prevent more, I'm all for. So I found that this way just works really well for me. We now have our 4 jars ready to go, all filled with milk, all to about the same place. Now we are just going to place them inside this pot of water. I didn't put very much water in this pot to begin with because I knew when I added the jars the water will rise. If you can see, the water is just right here, just to the very top of the line of milk inside the jar. We need it to reach 162 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 70 to 73 degrees Celsius. We're shooting for that temperature specifically because that is the temperature of pasteurization. Now, you might be wondering, why am I pasteurizing milk that has already been pasteurized? And that is a really excellent question. I am doing that because I feel that between the time that this milk has been pasteurized and has ended up in my home inside these jars, there are opportunities in there for bacteria or contaminants to enter the milk. Because I can't guarantee that there hasn't been anything introduced at any point, I like to go ahead and pasteurize it again myself before I add the cultures, just so I know that I'm starting with a completely clean slate. If you start with a clean slate, then you know that the cultures that you're adding aren't going to be competing with anything that's already in the milk. If that happens, you still might get, a nice thick yogurt, but depending on the amount of potential bad bacteria that was in it to start with and how much the yogurt culture has to kind of do battle with it to populate the milk, it could make your yogurt taste off. It doesn't mean that it's going to be bad for you, it just means that it's going to have a little bit of a funky taste. Because of that reason, I just like to start off knowing that I have completely clean milk, nothing else is in there, so I don't ever have to worry about that. We are going to let this milk heat up over medium heat. When I start to see a film develop on the top of the milk in these jars, that's when I'm going to start taking the temperature. When you start to see that film, you know that the temperature is getting close to what you need it to be. And it's a good idea to start taking the temperature so you don't overheat the milk. If you overheat the milk, you can start to denature it, and then it might not turn out the way that you're expecting it to. So we don't want to heat it too high, only to 162, and then we're going to shut the heat off. So our milk has now reached temperature. You can see here, I just want to show you this film that develops on top. When that film starts to develop, that's what we're looking for when we want to start taking the temperature. I'm going to use these canning jar tongs to take the jars out of the water. And as I take them out, I'm going to be really careful not to drip water into any of the other jars. We're gonna let this yogurt cool until it is about 115 degrees Fahrenheit, 46 degrees Celsius. That is the temperature that's going to be ideal for the yogurt culture to activate and to fully culture this milk. Yogurt culture is called a thermophilic culture. That means it needs a little bit of heat to get going. There's also a type called mesophilic culture, and that culture works best around room temperature. We can go down to about 110, so you want to be somewhere between that range, between 110 and 115. Too hot and you can risk starting to kill them off. Too cold and the cultures aren't going to really want to do anything. So that temperature range is the most ideal. In Celsius, that's about 43 to 46 degrees. While this is cooling, I just want to take a moment to talk about the types of milk we can use for this. We can use almost any kind of animal milk to make yogurt. I know around the world there are different types of milk that are more popular. Any of them can be used. The milk can be raw, it can be pasteurized or ultra pasteurized. They will all make fantastic yogurt. The only type of milk animal milk that you don't want to use is the shelf-stable, ultra heat-treated milk. So that milk you find in like the cereal aisle, I think, that are in the boxes that don't have to be refrigerated, don't use that milk. That milk has been heated to such a high temperature that the milk has actually started to denature, and it's just not going to work very well. So I recommend just staying away from that milk completely. Yeah, any other type of milk will work. There are a lot of different nut milks and soy milk. I have never tried to make yogurt from any of those, so I don't know if the process is the same or not. Someday maybe I'll have to try that to see how it works or how you can make yogurt with those. For those of you who might be lactose intolerant or that don't consume dairy, that could be a good option if you wanted to have yogurt. But I can't promise that this process specifically will work for those types of milk. But it will absolutely work for any kind of animal milk that you have. Our milk has cooled to 115 degrees. Now it's time to add our culture. For a quart size jar of milk, I'm going to add roughly about a quarter cup into each. That's about a big oversized tablespoonful. We're gonna stir this in. When we stir, we want to make sure that we not only go back and forth, but up and down as well. We want this yogurt culture to be completely dispersed throughout the entire jar of milk. Our culture has now been added. I'm going to add lids, and I'm going to use these canning lids. They're lids that I've used before, so they're not suitable to be used to can with, but they are perfect for things like this. The way I incubate these in the dehydrator, I want to make sure that the lids are airtight. We don't want to accidentally start to dehydrate the milk. So I'm going to set them in. If you notice, they're a little tilted. That's because the milk in the jars are kind of heavy for this tray. That won't affect anything. It will still turn out fine. Turn it on. Change the temperature. Again, we want to keep it between 110 and 115 degrees Fahrenheit, 43 to 46 degrees Celsius. I'm going to change the timer to 16 hours. Now you can incubate milk anywhere from 12 to 24 hours. The longer you incubate it, the tangier it's going to be. So you can make a choice on how you like your yogurt and adjust your tastes. I choose to incubate in my dehydrator because it's just the easiest way for me to do it. If you don't have a dehydrator, you can still incubate yogurt. You don't need one of those or an Instant Pot to make it. What you can do is you can use your good old oven. You can put your yogurt in here. I would put like a pot of hot water or something on the bottom rack and then put your yogurt on the top rack. Turn your pilot light on and it should stay about the right temperature for that entire duration. You can always check it. If the hot water isn't hot anymore and you see that the temperature has dropped, the pilot light isn't quite keeping it high enough, you can take the pan of water out, replace it with hot water, put it back in, and it will heat it back up. You can also use a cooler. That's another fun way to do this. You can take just a basic drink cooler and you can put the hot water in there. Make sure that it's not too hot. You don't want to overbake your yogurt. So keep the temperature, you know, about where you want to see it. I would bump it up maybe about 120 or so, just because it is going to cool a little bit. Put that into the cooler, put your yogurt into the cooler and shut the lid and keep it there for between the 12 to 24 hours, however long you choose to incubate it. That should work just fine. I will see you tomorrow morning. This will only be a moment for you, but for me, it'll be tomorrow morning when we pull these jars of yogurt out, and I'll show you what they look like when they come out of the dehydrator. So our yogurt is done incubating. I just wanted to give you a quick look of what it looks like when it comes straight out of the incubator. So you can see it's thickened up really nicely. We're gonna put this in the fridge now, and we're gonna let it cool for several hours, and that will thicken it up even more. Once it's cooled down, it's ready to enjoy. Our yogurt has cooled down and it's completely chilled. I wanna show you what it looks like now. See, it's very nice and firm, just like a good yogurt should be. It's got a nice tang to it. When I eat yogurt, my favorite way to eat it is topped with a little bit of honey and some granola. That is my absolute favorite way. Adding in dry or fresh fruit is also amazing. However you like to eat your yogurt, you can absolutely make this yourself at home. When you're about done with this batch and you want to go to make the next batch, you can actually use this yogurt for your starter culture for your next batch. You don't have to go buy another little cup of yogurt from the store to make your next batch. This will work perfect. At some point, the culture will kind of die down on its activity a little bit, and you'll start to see your yogurt get a little bit thinner. When you see that, just go grab some more yogurt, revive your culture, and it'll be good to go for the next quite a few batches after that. If you want a written version of how to make yogurt, I do have a post on my blog, wiredhomestead.com. I will link that in the notes below. I will also link the thermometer I used, the one that I really like. That has worked amazing for me. I'll link that in the notes below if you're interested in it. Thank you for joining me today. If you like this video, please consider hitting the like button. Please also consider subscribing. If you want to be notified when I upload my next video, you can click the bell right next to subscribe. You'll get a notification when my next video is uploaded. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope to see you next time.